Yes, sir.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second day of this faculty development program on electrochemical energy conversion and storage. So let me quickly share the slides. Good. So today we will be looking at the different aspects of fuel cells, primarily their fabrication methods, scale-up issues, and durability issues in the cell. So let's have a quick overlap of what we have studied yesterday. Before that, I'll quickly go through the contents of my talk. Once the overview of previous sessions is done, I'll switch on to the preparation of membrane electrode assemblies, which is considered as the heart of fuel cell. So better is the preparation method, better will be the performance of the cell. Second, we will then move on to the fuel cell stacking, how and what the important factors play a role in fuel cell stacking, why fuel cell stacking is important, followed by the scale-up issues in fuel cell, which will primarily be covering the heat and water management, importance of gasket, and significance of interfacial contact resistance. We will see all these things in detail. And finally, elaborate on cell durability, where we'll focus on catalyst degradation, membrane thinning, and bipolar plate oxidation. I'm sorry, I forgot to maximize. Yes. So we all now already know how a fuel cell works. So it's actually, you can see it's an electrochemical device that converts the chemical energy of gases directly into electrical energy. So it predominantly houses an electrolyte, solid membrane in this case, which is sandwiched between the two electrodes, that is anode and cathode. And this entire assembly is called as membrane electrode assembly, and that is holds tightly between the set of bipolar plates on either side. So bipolar plate, we will again see why it is called as bipolar plate. So bipolar plate, the primary function is to distribute the gases, the respective gases over the surface of electrodes. So when the hydrogen is supplied to the cell, it oxidizes into protons and electrons. Protons again pass through this membrane, whereas electrons pass through the external circuit, constituting to the current. And at cathode, these protons, electrons, and oxygen that has been supplied externally combine to form byproduct water. So now if we look at this heart of the fuel cell, which I just called as membrane electrode assembly, this is has a thickness approximately in not more than 1 millimeters. So if we get into the details of how each component contributes to thickness, then we can see that membrane normally has a thickness of 50 to 100 microns. Sometimes it is even 200 microns, depending upon what type of membrane you use. Catalyst layer, which is predominantly a combination of platinized carbon and some ionomer. So that actually has close to 10 microns. Close to microns. So the total thickness of this membrane electrode assembly is normally in the range of 1 millimeters or so. Sometimes it is much lesser, maybe close to 800 microns or even 900 microns. So we need to see all these reactions that we are talking about, the entire electrochemistry and even the thermodynamics, the entire the complicated matter is happening within this 1 millimeters of thickness, and that is why this membrane electrode assemblies, they are considered as the heart of fuel cell. I don't say that the other components do not matter much. They are all also important, but they are all supporting components in the field of fuel cell. So primary attention is always given to the preparation method or the fabrication method of this membrane electrode assembly, MEA. We will see that how that membrane electrode assembly is fabricated in a minute. Before that, let me just quickly review what Professor Ghosh was elaborating yesterday. He was talking about various losses. He also talked in terms of thermodynamics as well as the kinetics. Now, when we talk about the thermodynamic losses, they are all irreversible losses, which we can see here. Irreversible losses, they're called so because they cannot be reversed. We cannot go against thermodynamics. So it starts with the thermoneutral potential, that is ETN. Now, this is the potential that corresponds to enthalpy of the reaction, which is close to 286 kilojoules per mole of hydrogen. So when we say enthalpy of the reaction is 286 kilojoules per mole, that means it is a maximum energy that that one can expect from that reaction without considering the thermodynamics. Now, that is the ideal energy available, but as we all know, once the thermodynamics comes into picture, this energy is no more available to us. Now, since we operate, let's say we are operating the cell at standard temperature and potential conditions, that is 1 atmosphere and 300 Kelvin. Now that the potential, there will be some loss in the potential because of the the entropy term. So because we have already seen hydrogen oxidation reaction, that is H2 plus half O2 giving H2O, is an exothermic reaction. And if you are operating a fuel cell at standard temperature and pressure conditions, we are definitely losing some heat to the environment because of these, the exothermic reaction or the nature of that reaction, and that is why some heat is lost, because of which, when we say some heat is lost, we are actually losing some energy. So that's why it falls from 286 kilojoules to close to 237 kilojoules per mole. And if you convert this energy into respective potential by using this parameter called as NF, which Professor Ghosh was talking yesterday. NF is nothing but number of electrons per mole. And F is your Faraday's constant, which is 96,485 coulombs per mole. So if using this parameter, we can convert, or rather play between a potential and then energy. So 230 per mole comes down to, or it becomes equal to 1.23 volts. Now, fuel cells normally are operated at much higher temperature and pressure conditions. The pressure conditions has already been elaborated in detail by Professor Ghosh yesterday. We do it because we want to maintain that pressure difference at the within the cell, because more is the pressure difference, or more is the pressure that is supplied by the reactants, then the reactants will reach the reaction site more easily, and that is how you can then generate more current. So this is the case with the pressure. Now what happens with temperature? As we all know, the temperature is when we are increasing the temperature of the cell, we are in a way giving some thermal input to the cell. So that thermal input in terms of energy is actually utilized in catalyzing these reactions. So that temperature acts like a catalyst for this hydrogen oxidation as well as oxygen reduction reaction. So more is the temperature, more will be the catalytic activity, in the cell, and that is how we can generate more electrons in the reaction. We will also see why to what extent we can increase the temperature. Basically, that depends on the membrane or the electrolyte that you are using. Now, if I just specifically talk about the polymer electrolyte membrane fuel cell, which is which uses is Nafion membrane. Now, Nafion membrane, as we all know, it has got a Teflon backbone, and there is a sulfonic group attached to each monomer. So the property of Nafion membrane is it can function really well at close to 60, 65 or 70 degree temperature. But if we increase temperature more than that, now what happens is increasing more temperature, we are actually converting that water that is generated in the cell into the gaseous form, in the vapor form. And that happens, when that happens, the membrane also gets dried up really fast. And when the membrane gets dried up really fast, as being the property of this membrane, if membrane dries up, it actually loses the water content in the membrane, and if the water content is lost, then you have very serious issues in conducting the protons from one side to the other. So we need to have water available in the membrane, and if you want to have water available in the membrane, we should not cross that 100-degree temperature as a limit. And that's one of the primary reasons why polymer electrolyte membrane fuel cells, which predominantly use Nafion membrane, are not operated more than 80 degrees. That is with the membrane. When we talk about the catalytic activity, temperature of course helps any reaction in catalyzing it. So that way, that is one of the cells are conditions. Now that is what the Nernst potential En talks about. It actually takes into account the deviation of fuel cell operation from its standard temperature and pressure conditions. So we can, using some formula, we can estimate what could be the the potential of the cell if it is operated at so and so temperature and pressure conditions. Now, coming to the loss due to fuel crossover. Now, as we all know, hydrogen is a tiniest molecule that is available on this planet Earth. So it is not very easy for any system to take a hold of it. So even if we are using the Nafion membrane or any polymer in that case, or even the liquid electrolyte between the two electrodes, there is always some chance that the hydrogen, without getting oxidized at anode, will simply cross the membrane or the electrolyte and come over to the cathode side and get oxidized. Now, if that happens, then we have this hydrogen getting oxidized on the cathode, which will reduce the potential of the cell itself. And that is what we term it as loss due to fuel crossover, which is very negligible though, but that increases considerably if you are reducing the thickness of the membrane. Let's say we are using 10 microns of thickness, then there will be a huge crossover. If we are increasing the thickness of membrane to, let's say, 50 microns, the loss will be reduced. If you are using 100 microns of thickness of membrane, then the loss will further be reduced, because more is the thickness of electrolyte or membrane in this case, there will be more or less probability of gas to just cross through this membrane and reach the cathode side without getting oxidized on the anode side. So this is all about the thermodynamic loss, the drop from thermoneutral potential to Nernst potential. This is irreversible loss, which we cannot help, which we cannot edit. But there are few losses that we can minimize. We can almost make it negligible. Those are called as activation loss. The first one is the activation loss. Yes, fuel cell, loss due to fuel crossover is also there. That also can be minimized. Then we have activation loss. Then we have the ohmic loss, which actually corresponds to the membrane loss. Sorry, the loss due to the membrane's resistance to conduct the protons, and this is the eta ICR is nothing but the loss due to the interfacial contact resistance. We will see these things in detail in the upcoming slides. And third loss is nothing but your mass transfer loss. So if we go on subtracting all these loss from thermonuclear potential, we for extracting any current, we reach this open circuit potential. Those are called as irreversible losses. Now, as a moment you start extracting the current, if you go from zero to right on the x-axis, you are fetching more and more current, and if you are fetching more current, you have this losses slowly getting into picture. So first one is your activation loss, and as you go on extracting more current, even the membrane loss also gets added. These are all ohmic losses. So the ohmic losses, as was discussed by Professor, linear, so they definitely be there, but in the initial phase they will be really negligible, but they will become, or they will dominate the system if you are fetching more current. And if you go still further, then your mass transfer loss will come in picture, and that will further reduce the potential of the cell if you are reaching the limiting current. So this is what Professor Ghosh was talking about. Let me just go through these definitions, or let me little elaborate different losses. The activation loss is the energy required to kickstart the reactions at respective electrodes. Now, this is just like when you want to start your vehicle, let's say two-wheeler or even a four-wheeler, you either apply a kick, or you even start using your battery, right? When you say it's a button start. So what it means is you are first giving some energy in order to get the energy from the system. So that is how it works in fuel cell as well. That is why we have a sudden loss in the initial phase when we start drawing the current. That is called as activation loss. And now ohmic loss, as I've already explained, it is the energy or the potential loss due to the inherent resistance offered by the electrolyte as well as the interconnects. So since we are using some material to conduct the protons from one electrode to the other, that material will definitely have some resistance to flow of the electrons. There is no such material on this planet Earth that will not offer any resistance to proton conduction. Being the property of material, it will definitely resist this proton conduction. Similarly, if you are connecting your fuel cell through electrical wires, it doesn't matter how well you connect, what is the quality of those connecting wires, how well you have clamped the cell, there will be some resistance to the flow of electrons when they actually pass from one component to the other, or when they pass through these wires. So all these resistances, they are collected, and they are termed as ohmic losses or ohmic overpotential. Now, mass transfer, let me just quickly give you some analogy. I think that would help you out. Now, let's say we have a bucket of water here, and we are giving or putting some water in the bucket with a flow rate of M1. Okay, that is milliliters per minute. Let's just assume that way. Now, there is one more tap which is also supplied provided to this bucket. Now this you can tune. This is tap which can be adjusted based upon your requirements. Now let us imagine that you have opened this tap very little, so little that the water that is coming out of this tap, which is way lesser compared to your M1. So that is your case 1. So which means your water that is coming in the bucket is the quantity of that water is much higher compared to what you are taking out. So that if that is the case, then this water will this bucket will be filled really fast, and it will always be in the filled condition, right? Or it will be at least in the it will reach its maximum level very soon, or it will be there for a while. Now you what you do is you further go ahead and increase this or open this tap more, this tap, and you reach or you are now extracting V1 as a volume of water per minute, that is V1 ml per minute. Now that becomes your case 2. Now case 2 is, now what is happening, your the bucket, it is just little less or equal to your V1. Now what will happen? Your water level will go down and it will reach somewhere here, right? And then what will happen? You will definitely lose in terms of the height. Now, if you go on increasing the water that is supplied to the cell, you increase this quantity N1, and accordingly you also increase the water that is coming out of your fuel cell. I'm sorry, let me put it back. So now you are extract or taking V1 amount of water. Now your level has gone till this point. Now you want to go ahead and extract more. So now what you do, you increase the flow rate of water that is supplied to the cell. The water level will rise till this point, and then you go ahead and open this tap furthermore. So now you are fetching V2 amount of V2 amount of water from this tap. And if you go little ahead if you go little more, and if you open this tap fully, then you are fetching or actually taking V3 amount of water per minute from this tap. Now, if you see this concept, your water level in this bucket corresponds to the potential of the cell. The water that you're supplying to this bucket is nothing but your hydrogen flow rate or the reactant flow rate to the cell. And V1, V2, V3, what you call as the demand from the user, is nothing but your current. So same analogy is adopted here as well. Let's say you are maintaining the flow rate of hydrogen, and your current requirement is very minimum, which is your case 1. So when you have a very minimum amount of current that is required, then you obviously don't end up in mass transfer loss. You will either be in the activation loss or somewhere in the ohmic loss. You will not reach this mass transfer loss. But now you have increased the the current requirement. Now you want I1 amount of current, which is corresponding to V1. So like I said earlier, now we have reached or we are demanding the current which is equivalent to that of your flow. When we are demanding more current, which is flow rate, what it means is you are actually consuming the reactant that is being supplied to the cell. Now when that is happening, when that happens, you are actually losing in terms of potential, which is what happened in this case of bucket as well. When you are reaching when you are taking the same amount of water out of this bucket that you are supplying, then you are obviously at a loss of water in terms of height. Similarly, if you reach or if you start fetching more and more current, you definitely end up in this mass transfer zone. So does it mean that if you just go on increasing this current that we are fetching from the cell will increase or will give us potential? No, that is not the case. That is because the fuel cell is, like I said earlier, this is always dominated by this activation and activation energy and the ohmic energy or ohmic loss, that is loss due to the inherent resistance. So if you see this slope, this will come and go somewhere here till this point, which is, let's say, I4. Now, which means that you cannot extract current more than I4, which will be somewhere here, which is called as limiting current. Now, to increase, you either increase gases. What it means is, when you are increasing the flow rate of gases, you are supplying more reactants. So more reactants are available for the reactions at the reaction sites. So fuel cell is never at the in the starvation mode. It is always given enough reactants for the reaction, and that is why you will never see any mass transfer effect if you are increasing the flow rate. But if that is being done, then you are actually losing the fuel as well. You are wasting hydrogen as well as oxygen. So predominantly, like someone asked in the yesterday's lecture, that what is this flow utilization factor? You know, so utilization factor corresponds to what is the maximum, or the surplus amount that is normally supplied to this cell. So which is normally 10% or 20%. Now hydrogen, which is our fuel, since it is costly and it is precious as well. So normally in case of hydrogen, the utilization factor is close to 1.2, or it is like 20% more than the requirement. So you have to first choose what is the current level that that your user wants. Now, based on the current that could be faced from the cell, you can find out what could be the reaction or reactants that could be required for the cell, and based on that value, you increase the 20% amount in that cell. That is how normally fuel cells are supplied with the reactants. I hope this explanation is helpful. Now let me quickly go ahead. Now it's coming to the preparation of membrane electrode assembly. Like I said, it is the heart of fuel cell. So it requires utmost care and attention in preparation method. Any slight mistake will definitely have a severe effect on this preparation of this membrane electrode assembly, and it will also indirectly have an effect on cell performance. So it predominantly involves three steps or three methods, three steps. You have the membrane treatment, then you have the electrode preparation, and once you have this membrane treated and electrode being fabricated or prepared, we have to press these things in hot press. We will see all these things in detail in this or in the next slide. So coming to membrane treatment, now membrane, as I already talking about, it comes like in the layered form. I mean, there are some plastics that are covered to the which actually cover these membranes. So once we have to remove those those envelopes, and then we have to take this membrane and we have to first treat them with the 30% nitric acid for roughly 1 hour at 80 degrees centigrades. Now all these values are already optimized in the literature. You can get this. You can play with these values. You can, instead of 30%, go for 25%. You can even go for 35%. These are the approximate values that you can take. You can also heat for 45 minutes, even 30 minutes of heating time is also enough. Temperature also can be adjusted to some extent. It can be 70 degrees or even 90 degrees, but more is the temperature of this heater of the solution, then actually you have more chances of water getting evaporated. So we have to make sure that not enough water gets evaporated, but it's also hot enough for the treatment. So once this treatment with nitric acid is done, this is primarily done to remove all the impurities that are present on the surface of membrane. So once this membrane is freed from the impurities, it is washed in the deionized water again for the same time and temperature to remove all the impurities or this acid which is left over on the surface of these membranes. After that, it is now treated with the sulfuric acid with approximately 1 molar of solution at same time and temperature. Now, what happens is when you treat these membranes with sulfuric acid, you are actually activating those proton sites which are present in the membranes. You are actually activating those sulfonic groups by supplying more protons to the solution, to the membrane actually. So once this thing is done, this actually improves the total proton conduction or the protons that are attached to the sulfonic group in the membrane, and that is how it will function better in terms of proton conduction. So once this process is done, it is again washed in deionized water for the same temperature and time. So this completes the membrane treatment. So once you have washed your membranes in deionized water as a final step, they can be placed in the at a cooler place just to avoid mishandling. So this completes the membrane treatment. Now we have to go to the electrode preparation. Now there are various ways through which you can actually prepare this electrode. I'm going to show you the one of the robust ways to prepare these electrodes. So this is called as brush coating or the electrode preparation using brush coating method. So what we have to do is we have to first take the carbon paper, which is our gas diffusion layer. You can also take carbon cloth. These are the things that I have already explained in the last class. Once you take this carbon paper, you have to first Teflonize using an appropriate method. Now Teflonization is very important because now the water that gets generated in the cell, that needs to be taken out at every moment. If you don't do that, if that water doesn't come out, if it stays there at the reaction sites, then the as we all know, the water is getting generated on the oxygen side, and if you don't take that water out from the reaction site, then your oxygen that you are supplying will not be able to reach the catalyst sites. And if that doesn't happen, or if rather that happens, if oxygen doesn't reach the reaction site, then we will not be able to generate any current in the cell. And that is again one of the reasons or one of the causes for mass transfer limitations to occur. So that water also or water that gets generated also becomes the major factor for mass transfer losses. And if you want to avoid that, we have to Teflonize this gas efficient layer. Now, Teflon, as we all know, it's a hydrophobic in nature, so it doesn't like water, Teflon at all. So, carbon will not hold any water, and that way we will be able to take every water molecule out of the cell. So it is Teflonized using appropriate method. So once it is Teflonized, it is dried and then sintered at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. Now this time and temperature again important, because once you Teflonize, once you dip in the solution that contains Teflon and it is dried, it is not over. It is that Teflon has to be distributed over the surface of carbon paper, not just on the surface, into the entire volume of this carbon paper uniformly. And for that to happen, the Teflon that has been solidified after this drying needs to be melted. So as we all know, the approximate temperature at which this Teflon melts is roughly around 320 degrees centigrades. So we have to maintain temperature higher than this melting temperature. That is why it is predominantly done at 350, 360 degree temperatures in the furnace for 30 minutes. 30 minutes of time is enough for Teflon to melt, and then it is allowed to cool naturally. So that becomes your sintered for the next step. So once the sintered carbon is ready and it is cooled down using natural method, then you have to put this carbon, you have to load this sintered carbon paper using carbon slurry or carbon. Basically this step is important because we have to have a smoother surface of your carbon paper. Earlier it is not smooth. You can actually see you can feel the roughness of this carbon paper, which is not good for yourself. So you have to make it smoother, and for that we have to put this carbon, activated carbon, on the surface using this brush coating method. This is the loading that is given. Normally carbon is loaded at the rate of 1.5 milligram per centimeter square. This solution also contains some Teflon. So once you coat it, and once you reach this optimized loading, then it is again sintered using same process, and then it is ready for the catalyst loading. So this completes your gas diffusion layer. Now putting catalyst is even further simple. You have to follow the same method. You take the catalyst ink with the ionomer, and then you brush coat this sintered GDL. You have to dry it, and then again once it dries, again you have to apply this catalyst using soft hand, extremely soft hand, and once the once once you have reached the optimized loading that you have wanted to achieve, then that makes it your electrode ready, which is your catalyst coated electrode, which is abbreviated as CCE. Now we have to make two electrodes. Like I said earlier, we want two electrodes. So one is for hydrogen electrode, other one is for the oxygen electrode. Now once such two electrodes are ready, we have to keep the membrane in between the two, and we have to hot press. We have to hot press this entire assembly. In the hot press given, I've shown you the hot press here. We have to keep like we do in case of dosa. We keep it and then we again cover it. So accordingly, we have to keep this entire assembly and hot press it at given condition. That is, pressure should be maintained at 60 kg per centimeter square. Temperature of those platens, top and bottom platen, should be maintained close to at 130 degrees centigrades, and time for pressing is roughly around 30 minutes. Now all these parameters are already been given in the literature. Now reason I'm trying to emphasize here is, although all this information is available in the literature or even in this tech world, but it takes one's patience and perseverance to get a hold of this membrane electrode assembly. This picture you can show, this is one of my, this is the ME, these are the MEAs that I prepared during my doctoral work, and if you can see, this was the first MEA that I prepared using same parameters, and if you can clearly see, it is in terribly bad condition. This is definitely not an MEA that would be put up in a fuel cell. You can see the wrinkles formed on this the MEA while it was hot pressed, whereas this figure on the right shows you the membrane electrode assembly, and look at the finish. It is very fine. I mean, not just in terms of the appearance, but it also gave very good performance. Here you can see the performance comparison. Both of these MEAs were tested actually. Now this is actually performance of a unitized regenerative fuel cell. Let us not get into details of what it is and how it works. You can simply look at this characteristic curve of during fuel cell mode, that is your IVFC initial and IVFC final that you need to see. And initial one, which is the MEA that was fabricated in the first time, actually performed terribly bad. Whereas after a good practice, let me also say that I spent almost 2 years in understanding how this membrane electrode assembly preparation method affects and what are the salient features of this thing. This is actually an art, although we keep on looking on how our mothers prepare rotis and how they prepare the vegetables, but unless we do it by ourselves, we will not be able to understand what are the different parameters that play a big role in making that vegetable more tastier. So that's the same way. Although all these things are available in the literature, we have to spend some quality time in understanding each and every parameter. During hot press, you have to also understand this preparation method. This brush coating also is it takes your patience out. So this also needs more time, and it also needs a lot of practice. And here you can see now how do we say that this performance is poor, the red one is poor and the black one is good. So that way you can it's very easy to find out. Let's say I'm plotting at 0.5 volts, let's say at 0.6 volts for rather 0.6 volt. This is giving close to almost zero performance. I mean, maybe it could be 100 milliamps per centimeter square, the red one. That is the first one. Whereas the black one, which is the optimized one, is giving close to more than 400 milliamps, almost 4 times higher at 0.6. If you go at 0.3, it is still even more better compared to much better compared to initial one. So that way, if your current is more for the same potential, which means your power, which is the product of potential and the current, is also more. Yes, let's come back to importance of fuel cell stacking. Before we get into this, let me quickly show you why fuel cell stacking is important, why we scale up, what are the different issues in that. Now, let's say we want to carry a load of two people. We can go for the two-wheeler, right? Which has got a capacity approximately of 20 horsepower. Once let's say our load has increased, now we want to carry 4 to 5 people. Now we will definitely choose four-wheeler, because two-wheeler, although it can pull over, but it's not convenient way. We can still go with the four-wheeler. But now as your capacity has increased to, let's say, 30 people, now we'll obviously hire a six-wheeler, right? Which has got an engine capacity of, let's say, 200 horsepower. These are approximate numbers. Now, as your load is increasing, or rather, let me put it in another way, as your demand is increasing from 2 people to 30 people, there are two choices that are left to us. Either the first step is, let's say you want to carry a load of 30 people, you can have 10 engines of capacity, which is equivalent to a two-wheeler, right? So 10 two-wheelers can pull 30 people because it is coming to 200 horsepower. If we just talk about the numbers, we are not getting into the complexities of the engines. Or we can take 2 to 3 two-wheelers, four-wheelers to pull this load of 30 people of capacity. But is it a good way to do that? Is it a good way to carry a load of 30 people using 10 two-wheelers or 3 two-wheelers? It's better to have a six-wheeler, right? A single engine which will carry the capacity of 30 people. Now that is the first choice, having 10 two-wheelers or three-wheelers. Three numbers of four-wheelers and one six-wheeler, either way. So the next choice is obviously to increase the size of engine from 20 horsepower to 200 horsepower, and then carry the load of 30 people. So that is one of the reasons why capacity of engines, or even in case of fuel cells, the stacking is done because we want to have more power if the situation is demanding that way. And how do we increase the capacity? We can either go ahead with the increase in the size of the fuel cell. That way it will deliver more current. We will see all these things in next slide. But once we scale up, whether it is an engine or even a fuel cell, that increment in the size comes at a cost. At some cost, it is not done for it is not like freely available. It will increase your fuel consumption, right? If you can see the two-wheeler, let's say it is giving a mileage of 30 or 40 kilometers per liter. If you increase its size, engine size, make it more bigger, the four-wheeler will have roughly mileage of 20 liters, 15 to 20 liters per liter, whereas six-wheeler will definitely have a lower mileage. I think it's somewhere around 5 to 6 kilometers per liter of your diesel. So what with increase in the size of your engine comes at a cost of increasing the fuel consumption, right? You are increasing fuel consumption, you have less mileage, and you also more complications in the engine management. In similar way, once we increase the stack, once we increase the size of fuel cell, once we increase the size and even the number of cells, their complications increase, and that is what we will see in the next slides. So as Professor Ghosh was talking about voltage and current, the voltage is actually limited by thermodynamics, which we have seen in the last slide. Whereas current is actually limited by the kinetics. How well is your electrode fabricated? How well or what is the catalytic activity there? How good is your catalyst? Then what is the the bonding or interaction between the electrode and electrolyte? All these things matter the most in case of when we start drawing a current. Now here I've just tried to show you how to increase the power, or how to expect more power, or how to extract more power from the cell. This is your typical characteristic curve that you have shown. This is VI characteristic. Now let's say this is your operating point P1 here. Yeah, this is your power density curve. This is what Professor Ghosh was also talking yesterday. This goes from minimum to maximum. It reaches maximum somewhere just before your mass transfer zone begins, and then it again falls exponentially. So let's say this is your P1 is your first operating point. Then at P1 you have voltage close to 0.8 and current density close to 200 per centimeter square. Now if you go still further, at point P2, you will have more power, obviously, which is roughly more than 0.6 volt, and the current density is close to maybe 650 or so milliamps per centimeter square. Now this is your maximum power or rather more power compared to point P1. Now if you go still further at point P3, which means you are fetching more and more current. You are in point P1 you are fetching 200 milliamps, and now in point P2 you are fetching 650 milliamps per centimeter square. Now you went still further and you end up at the point where it can be fetched at maximum. So that is your point P3, which is through which you are, or by which, or at which you are fetching current close to maybe 1200 or little 1100 milliamps per centimeter square. Now, but look at the voltage as well. The voltage at this point is almost close to 0.3, which is very low for a fuel cell to operate. It is almost dying. It is starving actually. So this is one of the ways you can increase the power of fuel cell. You have to choose the operating point. The operating point of fuel cell is always close to your Pmax, or if not, it is close to your P2 point. It is even not close to Pmax. I'm sorry for that. That is because even a slight change in the load can put the cell in mass transfer zone, and then more complications will begin. So that is why it is in the close to P1 to P2, somewhere here point. So this is called as partial load. This is what Professor Ghosh was also talking. If the vessels are operated at partial load rather than rated load, then the efficiency of fuel cell is much higher compared to your conventional engines. Now let's come back to how we can increase the power. In order to increase the power, either voltage, like we have seen voltage, either voltage or current or both should be increased. And how do we increase both? You can do that by increasing the number of cells. And if you increase the number of cells, the power increases linearly. More is the number of cells, more is the power of the fuel cell stack. And that's one of the reasons why fuel cells are stacked or they are in series. Now, why they are stacked in series? Because if you have seen the fuel cells are the devices that deliver extremely high current, whereas their working potentials or operating potentials are pretty low. These are values in amperes, sometimes 100 amperes, 200 amperes, 300 amperes, whatnot. But operating potential of single fuel cell is always less than 1 volt. It's not that if you make one big cell, then it will deliver, let's say, 300 amperes. So more is the current, more is the potential. It's not like that. Potential is always less than 1 volt, and it is dominated by the your reaction that is happening. We will see this in yeah. Before that, let me quickly show you how, now that we have understood the importance of fuel cell stacking, we will see how stacking is actually being done. Now let's take an example of these batteries here. Let's say you want to have more and more power from the batteries. What do? You either increase the one size of a single battery, or you put them in a stack, right? Now, how do you put them in stack? You put this electrode, let's say positive electrode. The positive electrode of battery is connected to the negative electrode of the other cell. That is battery, and that is how you just go on. And then once you connect this terminal and this terminal using a load, the current flows, right? Similarly, in case of fuel cell, you have to connect in this fashion. I have shown you here. This is the example or schematic working of your 2-cell stack. Here you have one membrane or one cell here. Now, once you have this hydrogen supplied to the first cell, the similar reactions take place. You have this oxidation of hydrogen delivering protons and electrons. Now, protons again pass through this membrane. They reach this cathode side of first cell. Now, electrons, they need to be passed from the external circuit. Now they come to this current collector, that is bipolar plate, and they reach let's say till this load point. Now let me I'll come to this the other half in a minute. Now what is happening here is these electrons that are again collected by this current collector or the bipolar plate, they come out because they are externally connected. They pass through the load, that's where you get the current, and they reach the cathodic bipolar plate, that is current collector of the second cell, not the first cell, second cell. Now they have come here. Since it is also a good conductor of electricity through this channels, which is again connected to your electrode, the cathode of your second electrode. Now here also the similar reaction is also taking place. You have this hydrogen oxidation, proton again pass through this membrane, this cathode. Now this cathode also wants electrons, right? Now where does this cathode get electrons from? They get electron from this current collector of this cathode, which is the electrons which are supplied by the anodic current collector of first. So 2 moles of electrons again pass through this bipolar plate. They through gas diffusion layer, they reach the catalyst sites, and they combine with protons and oxygen and produce the byproduct water. Now let's come to this hydrogen oxidation, which is happening at the second cell, that is anode of second cell. Now hydrogen oxidation has already been taken place. Protons have already crossed this membrane. What happens to these electrons? Now these electrons again, since this is membrane is a purely an ionic conductor, this is not an electronic conductor. Electrons cannot pass through this membrane, so they have to pass. They have to come to the electrically conducting material, which is your gas diffusion layer and the bipolar plate, which is I've shown in at the center. Now, since once the moment they enter this bipolar plate, which is this is a special bipolar plate, which takes these electrons and then gives these electrons to the cathode of first cell. Now, see, if you see the electrons, the moles of electrons, the moles of protons, moles of oxygen, every condition is satisfied. Every condition is satisfied. I mean to say, if it is giving you two, if this reaction is giving 2 moles of electrons, these 2 moles of electrons are consumed here. If this reaction, that is hydrogen oxidation in the second cell is giving 2 moles of electron, those are also consumed in the cathode of first cell. So that way the proton requirement and electron requirement from one cell and the other cell is fully satisfied. Now let's come to this bipolar plate, which is at the center. Now this bipolar plate has special channels that supply this oxygen to the first cell and hydrogen to the second cell. Let me repeat, these channels are made in such a way that these gases do not mix up in the bipolar plate. They are not mixed. I have clearly shown the colors and the different the arrows in different colors. They are not at all mixed. There is a special arrangement that is been taken care, that is been given here. So this bipolar plate, if you see, or this current collector, if you see, this has got channels on this side as well as this side. So these channels, the channels on left, they take care of oxygen distribution for the first cell, whereas these channels, they take care of hydrogen distribution for the second cell. And if you look at this current collector at the center, it is facing the protons or the anode here on this side, whereas cathode on this side, and so that way it is facing 2 poles on the either side of its faces. So that is why it is called as bipolar plate. That is why it is called as bipolar plate. Now it is very simple. If you want to have 3-cell stack, I've already shown how dismantled form of 3-cell stack looks like. But here also you can imagine you have to put one more bipolar plate like this here and one more MEA and this simple bipolar plate on the other side. If you want 4-cell stack, if you want 5-cell stack, that way you can just go on increasing. I hope this is clear. We will come back to the doubts once we reach the end of this session. Let me go ahead. This is how fuel cell stacking is done. You can schematically see here. Once you have the MEA ready, this is the bipolar plate. You can see it has the channels grooved on this side as well as on this side. So that becomes a bipolar plate. Now this becomes one single cell here. It has got bipolar plate on both sides. There is one MEA along with the gasket and everything. It is packed. Similar way you have to stack the package, and then you have to clamp the entire system using appropriate clamping arrangement, primarily using nut and bolt pairs. So this forms the fuel cell stack. Now, yes, why do we? Yeah, let me just finish this up here. Why do we want to stack it up? Now, as I've already told you, fuel cells deliver extremely high amounts of current, but their operating potentials are pretty low. They are conventionally operated at close to 0.5 volts, and 0.5 volt is pretty low voltage. So if you want to increase the power of stack, the very conventional way or very best way is to put them in series, just like in the case of batteries. So they are always connected in series because that is how you can add up the potential. The current remains the same. Now, if they are connected in series, if you look at things here, you can see that 2 moles of electrons. If one cell is giving 2 moles of electron, the second cell is also giving 2 moles of electron. The third one will also give the 2 moles of electron. So the electrons that are generated are same. So since electrons generated are same, the current that is flowing through this entire stack is also same. So if one cell is giving you 100 amperes of current at 0.5 volt, the second cell is also expected to deliver 0.5 volt, 100 amperes of current at 0.5 volt. So that way, if we look at this two cell stack, this stack will have 100 amperes of current in total, and the total voltage will be 0.5 plus 0.5, which is 1 volt. So the power that is delivered by this two cell stack will be 100 amperes into total voltage, that is 1 volt, which is 100 into 1, that is 100 watt. So 100 watt power will be delivered by this fuel cell stack. So if you want more power, you can simply go on adding the cells of similar capacity, and then your stack will deliver appropriate power. Now let's come to one important parameter to understand this current density. I have been talking about current density so far. Now let us understand why we talk about current density. Why we talk in terms of current density. Now I have three cells here, like shown here. One is a small cell of 25 centimeter square, other one is 100 centimeter square, and the bigger one is 300 centimeter square. This is the current voltage characteristics of all three cells. Now you can see this is a very small cell. 25 centimeter square is a pretty small cell having this type of current voltage characteristics. Now, since this is a 25 centimeter square, the maximum current generated by this smaller cell will be also very small. That is why it is reaching the limiting current pretty early. But now when you increase the size of the cell, you are also increasing the flow rate, and once you are increasing the flow rate, you are also increasing the amount of current that is drawn from the cell. So this is your second IV curve. When it comes to further increment in the cell, you are again supplying more reactants to the cell. You have more area of the cell available for the reaction to occur, and that's why the current generation is also extremely higher. Just imagine the smaller cell is generating 25 amperes. This is generating, let's say, 100 amperes. The generating 300 amperes. Now, how do we choose, or how do we decide which cell is performing better? Is it just the number of the number of or rather amount of current that is drawn from the cell? If this is delivering 300 amperes of current, does it mean that this cell, the cell with higher area, is better than the other two? Or now, if let's say if I have a 500 centimeter square cell, single cell, that will again deliver 500 amperes. I'm just throwing some numbers here, but does it mean that the higher is the size of cell, higher is the performance, or better is the quality of the cell also? It is not. So let's just go back to the vehicles, that the example that we are talking about. When we compare the two-wheeler with the other two-wheeler, or when we compare two-wheeler with the four-wheeler, we compare one four-wheeler with the other company four-wheeler. What is the way that we compare? What is the conventional way? We ask what is the mileage, right? We say my bike is giving 30 kilometers per liter. How much is your vehicle giving? So that is the way. That is one of the ways you can normalize with respect to the mileage, or the kilometers that can be traveled in 1 liter. If my vehicle is giving 30 kilometers and my friend's vehicle is giving, let's say, 35 kilometers, then his vehicle is better in terms of your mileage, or in terms of performance. So similarly, in case of fuel cell, you have to normalize. You have to normalize based on the current that is drawn with respect to area of the cell, and that is why if you see here, yeah, this is what I was talking about. So this is let's say giving at 0.6 volt. Let's say this is your 0.6 volt. This is giving, let's say, 25 amperes. This is giving, let's say, 100 amperes, and this is giving, let's say, 300 amperes. So obviously, size increasing the size will increase the current delivery capacity, but that is not the way you should compare the cells. You have to compare the cells with respect to the current that is normalized with respect to the area, and that is how this concept of current density has come in the picture. Now, if you look at this size, this one, yeah, I'm sorry, I was referring to the 300 centimeter square. If you now normalize with respect to area of the, this one is performing the poorest. If you just lower the size little bit, if you come to 100 centimeter square, this will perform relatively okay. Whereas if you go on decreasing the size of fuel cell, again, let's say to bring it down to 25 centimeter square, its performance will be further enhanced. Now, this is because as your size of the cell is decreasing, you have less complications faced by your fuel cell. You have a very better distribution of the gases if your size of the cell is small. The heat management, the heat that is produced by the cell is also very minimum. That also you don't need to address. The water that is produced by in the cell, that also is very minimum. That also need not be worried about. Then you have a better distribution of the clamping force that we have, and that is why we have to normalize the fuel cells based on the area. Now, why does a higher fuel cell with higher area perform poor? We will see all those things now. Those are the scale-up issues with the fuel cell. There is the problem with the distribution of the gases. We also have to deal with the heat and water management. We also have to see the distribution of contact pressure, at the interface of electrode and the bipolar plate. We have to also see the hydrogen crossover, and there are some durability issues as well. Coming to the other points, in hydrogen infrastructure, we have already seen this. Cost of material also increases exponentially or rather linearly as and when you go on increasing the size of the cell. Well, we will not get into these details. We will just quickly see what and how these issues are addressed. The first one is the distribution of gases. Now here you can see, as your size of the cell increases, you have different designs of flow field patterns that are actually explored. Here on the right, you can see different patterns. One is the first one is a serpentine pattern, which is quite famous in fuel cell area. The next one is a parallel flow. Then you have this multi-channel flow, and the last one is your discontinuous or interdigitated flow pattern. Now, out of this, you can choose anyone based on your liking or based on your priorities. We have to make sure one thing, that the pressure drop across this area of the fuel cell. This is your area of the fuel cell or the electrode area. The pressure drop across this area, whenever the reactants pass through these channels, the pressure drop has to be minimum. If there is more pressure drop, that means that particular flow field design is not good. Because if you have more pressure drop when the gas passes through these channels, then your fuel will not be able to reach the end of your channels, and that will be the region where the fuel cell will actually starve for the reactants. They starve out of the reactants, and that is again very severe cause for the fuel cell degradation. And that will affect the entire cell. So we have to make sure whatever design we choose, is it compatible to your solution? Is it giving you appropriate values of pressure drop? Is it satisfying the gas distribution or not? So all these things need to be taken care of. And also one more thing I wanted to highlight: more is the size of the cell, more is the complex design and the travel length as well. So you cannot just think of 1000 centimeter square cell. More is because area increases, then you also have to increase the channel length, and accordingly it also will have more pressure drop. There is a famous dialogue in that Spider-Man, right? More power comes with more responsibilities. So similarly, if you increase the size of the cell, you have to deal with other side effects as well. Now let's come back to heat and water management. Now, as I have already told you, if the size of the cell is small, then you will definitely have, we don't have to worry much about the heat that is generated by the cell, because the size of the cell is small, then that means it is generating relatively less current, and less current means it is also generating very less heat. But this problem becomes more serious as and when you go on increasing the size of the cell, preferably beyond 50 centimeters square. And this becomes a major concern when you have a stacks. Now, for example, if you have a fuel cell stack which is delivering you 1 kilowatt of electrical power, and it is operating at 50%. I'm also giving the same example what Professor Ghosh had given yesterday. Now, if you have 1 kilowatt of output from the fuel cell, and that is again in electrical power. So which means you have 54% of thermal energy that is going west. So that means you have 1 kilowatt of heat that is also getting generated in the cell. Now, if you don't entertain, or if you don't address that heat that is generated in the cell, that will have a very serious issues or concerns in the cell, because your membrane will first get degraded. It will lose the water content, and once it loses water content, it will just act like an insulator to the protons. So that is the very first thing. So if it is acting as an insulator to the protons, you can imagine there will be huge ohmic resistance that will be offered by the cell. So that is the very first reason. Next one, there are also some chances of catching or fire in the cell, because if the temperature of cell is increasing, it might happen that your membrane will catch fire at some local points or local places, and that will again puncture the membrane. And once the membrane gets punctured, it is very easy for gases to pass from one side to the other side. And if that happens, if there will be some chances that there will be hydrogen burning in the cell itself. So we have to extremely take care of this heat management in the stacks. So normally they are always cooled with water. There are some dedicated channels that are given in the bipolar plate, and it is made sure that water that is supplied in this bipolar plates, different bipolar plates of a stack, they are not mixed. They are not they do not mix with the reactants, or they do not come anywhere in the reaction sites. So it is just like a coolant water. Normally pure water is supplied, because we don't want to get into the complexities of impure water being supplied to the cell. That is with the heat management. Now let's come back to the water management. Now, as we already know, water gets generated on the cathode side. When the size of the cell is small, you have very little water getting generated, so which again comes out with the oxygen that is supplied to the cell. But when you have the size increase from 2 centimeters square to 200 centimeters square, like I've shown in figure on the right, as and when you supply the oxygen gas, this is the water get generated or water distribution on the cathode side. And you can see as the oxygen enters, slowly water starts generating on the cathode side, and it increases, and then once it increases, it actually becomes very difficult for the gas to reach the the reaction site. So it is very important to take this water out every time. So what is normally being done is all of a sudden the the oxygen gas flow is increased from, let's say you are supplying with 1 liter per minute. You for a moment you supply 2 liters per minute. So in a way you are supplying more gas to the to the cell, which works as a flushing, which actually helps in flushing this water out, which is generated in the cell, and that way you can clean up or we can maintain the water level inside the cell. So this is one of the ways it has to be, and that is a continuous process. This is a continuous optimization process. It is not like one step, once you are done, the problem is solved. More is a generation of current, more is also generation of water. And this is one of the reasons why your gas diffusion layer, I was talking earlier, it is made hydrophobic. Now these days even the bipolar plates are also made hydrophobic in nature by appropriate methods. So that way you make sure that this water that is present or that is generated in the cell is less hospitable to the cell. So that way it comes out of the cell very easily. Now let's talk about the second, the second issue with the scale up of this scaling up of the cell. Now you have got this membrane electrode assembly here, the gasket which surrounds the gas diffusion layer, and then the bipolar plate which covers this entire assembly along with the gasket. Now this is the ideal thickness of gasket. It's exactly in this having same thickness compared to your or with respect to your gas diffusion layer. But what happens is in practice you don't get thickness of gasket which is very similar to that of your gas diffusion layer. Now if the thickness of gasket is small, as you can see in this figure, the second figure, as the thickness of gasket is small compared to your gas diffusion layer, there will be some leakage that you can expect from these ends of the gasket when the cell is clamped. That is due to the thinner gasket that is being used. Whereas if you use a thicker gasket compared to the electrode size or his electrode thickness, then there is not enough contact between the bipolar plate and the gasket. Contact between the bipolar plate and the gas diffusion layer, which again increases the contact resistance at the interface. We will see that in detail if time permits. And when this is with the case of gasket. Now what happens when you scale up the cell? Now this is the cross section. You can imagine this is a small cell of 25 centimeters square. Now when you clamp at the periphery, you can expect a local bending of this bipolar plates or even the end plates like I've shown here. But this local bending is very small when the size of the cell is small. So it does not have that much severe effect on the performance, because you have better contact between the gas diffusion layer and the bipolar plate somewhere here at the interface. But as and when your size of the cell increases from 25 to 300 centimeters square, and as you clamp the cell at the periphery, you can see considerable bending of this bipolar plate like this. Now one might also ask, why is the bending like this? That is because the gas diffusion layer is made up of carbon, and that also has got a substantially good strength in terms of elastic moduli. So that is why there is some local bending of this bipolar plate, and that because of that there is a local separation of this electrode or gas diffusion layer from this bipolar plate interface. And if they are not connected, there will obviously there will be no electron transfer from this electrode to the bipolar plate. They will again transfer, all these electrons will be transferred from the extreme ends. So that way we are increasing the contact resistance of the cell. So this is one of the very primary reasons why fuel cells, when they are scaled up, they perform poor when they are compared on the current voltage characteristics. Now here you can see the contact pressure distribution for a 300 centimeter square cell. This is the dismantled form of fuel cell, and here you can see the simulated result of contact pressure. I'm sorry, I should have written things down here. So this is the contact pressure distribution of or of the pressure or the contact pressure at the interface of your GDL and bipolar plate. This is the simulated one, and this is the experimental. Now look at the experimental one. I mean, if you see, this is a 300 centimeter square area, which is almost equivalent to your A4 size sheet paper. You can see that there are a lot of areas where I mean, this gas diffusion layer is not connected with the bipolar plate. You can see these white areas, blue and white areas. So blue area means there is a extremely low pressure, and white means that area is not at all touched upon, maybe because of the some errors, but by and large it is not very uniform. You can see the contact pressure distribution, and if you look at the number, it is all in relatively in green and yellow color, which is means the approximate contact pressure is somewhere close to 0.4 megapascal. Now 0.4 megapascal is extremely low pressure in terms of contact pressure, because we want contact pressure in the range of 1 megapascal. So that is one of the reasons why you have more contact resistance at the interface, and more is the resistance at the interface, more will be the effort taken by the electrons to cross the interface. So they will end up in losing the potential. So the rather cell will end up in losing the potential of the cell. So let me quickly show you this one. As you can see, as I'm going on increasing the clamping torque from 3 Newton meters to 5 Newton meters for a definite gasket, let's say. So for a given gasket rather. So you can see with increasing the clamping pressure in terms of clamping torque, you are increasing the contact pressure, which is very obvious, because as you are increasing the the clamping pressure for gasket of 0.2 millimeters, that is 200 microns. So your contact pressure is really good at the interface of the gas diffusion layer. But now look at the change in the gasket. Now gasket has been changed to 0.3 mm, which is 300 microns. Now, like I have already mentioned, if you are using thicker gasket, there will be not enough contact pressure at the interface of gas diffusion layer and the bipolar plate. Now this is what you can see here. When you are using low thick or thinner gasket, you have a nice contact pressure at the interface. You have close to 0.5 to 0.6. This is even sometimes crossing 0.6 megapascal. Whereas if you are using 0.3 millimeters, that is 300 microns of gasket, that is thicker gasket, expecting pretty low contact pressure at the interface. So this is also very important thing. Gasket I was already talking about. Gasket selection is extremely important, and which manages this contact pressure at the interface. On right you can see the contact resistance, which varies with the contact pressure. This contact pressure at the interface of gas diffusion layer and the bipolar plate, and you can see that contact pressure is increasing as this contact pressure goes from 0.2 to 0.6, or maybe from 0 to 5 megapascal. You have more pathways generated between the gas diffusion layer and the bipolar plate, which help in these electrons to pass or pass over this interface, and that is why your contact resistance decreases exponentially. So we have to choose. We have to make sure that this contact resistance is maintained at pretty low level, and for that we have to play with all these parameters when you are scaling up the cell. And gasket is one of the components which is not paid enough attention. We say that okay, we are, let's say, working on 25 centimeters square. If you are using XYZ gasket with XYZ thickness, or let's say with some 0.2 mm of thickness, we intend to use the same gasket when we scale up. It's actually a wrong way to do, to assemble the cell. We have to look into the material properties as well as the thickness of the gasket when we are actually scaling up. I think let me just stop here. It's already 56. There are I wanted to cover, but unfortunately, because of the time constraints, I will not be able to cover it up. Thank you everyone for listening to this session patiently. I'll be happy to take on the queries from the audiences. Thank you everyone. Let me. Yes, I have given the I have authorized the participants to unmute themselves. We will have a quick you know session of solving your queries, and then we'll have a break, and we'll again come back to next session. Yes, any questions? Any queries? Hello.
Hello.
Mr. Anjan Sahu. Sahu sir.
No, sir. No question, sir.
Okay, no problem. Okay, then I think
Sir,
if no one has,
sir, I have
yes,
a question.
yes, please.
I'm Dr.
Hello.
Suren Kumar Singh from MBA Engineering College, Jodhpur, Rajasthan.
Yes, sir.
So you have shown modeling results for this contact pressure, and in the last slide also. So in which
This
software you have done these simulations?
this particularly slide number 41.
Slide number 40 also you showed some simulated results.
Okay, yeah. So this related result is from ANSYS structural. You can use that software. You can use the contact pressure as a. There is one option in the ANSYS. You can even look for the more better explanation in the videos. And this distribution which I have found experimentally is using pressure films. So pressure films, they normally come in the thickness of, I think they're thinner than 50 microns. I'm exactly not able to remember, but they are very thin. And once you put those pressure films at the interface of your interest, and if you put some pressure, then that will give you the distribution the way it is being shown here.
They're like liquid crystal films for
I'm sorry.
temperature measurement.
Yeah, something like that. But you also have a dedicated software for this, which you need to install. Because if you just let me show things here. So if you have once you have taken the impression of your pressure, those films you need to be taken to a dedicated scanner, and that scanner will scan that film, and these values will again be converted into numbers with the software. So this software which I have used here is from Fujifilm. There are pressure sensitive films that you can see for your more interest, and the software also comes along with the dedicated scanner which you need to have.
In ANSYS, you have some fuel cell module separate?
ANSYS, this one ANSYS, this is a structural modeling, sir. So this structural modeling doesn't have any fuel cell kind of thing. That is like a structural thing. If whatever you design, it will give you results based on your input parameters. But if you are talking about the CFD modeling, CFD modeling has a definitely has got a fuel cell as well as electrolyzer models.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, hello, sir. I'm Biju from Government Engineering College, Calicut, Kerala.
Yes,
my
sir.
question is regarding that IV characteristics. Yeah, for different sizes, like varying from say 25 centimeters, higher sizes. You mentioned that the current density is better small one. So is it the payment fuel cells? What will be the if we look into the high temperature fuel cells like solid oxide cells and whether the pattern will be same? It will be decreasing with increasing size.
No, pattern will always be the same. More is the size of the cell. There will be more complications in the cell, like I've already mentioned about the hydrogen distribution or even the fuel distribution. You have this water management, you have this heat management, this contact resistance problem. Issues will get multiplied as and when you increase the size of the cell. So when you just talk about in terms of current density, you will always feel that your higher cell or area, the cell with the higher area will perform inferior. But you also need to take into account that once you're increasing the size, your power is also increasing. Like, which is what I have shown here. When you just talk about current and current and voltage, not current density, you will always see, you will always have a feel that your cell with higher area is giving you more performance, which is true, which is not false. But when you try to normalize these results or these performances with area, then your size, the cell with higher area will always perform inferior to compared to the smaller sizes because of these following issues that I've just talked about. I hope I have answered your question.
Sure.
Yeah. So this is with every cell. This is with every cell, every type of fuel cell. Yeah.
Okay. Fine.
Yeah.
Fine. Thank you.
Yeah. No problem. Yes, sir.
Sir, myself Ashish Kumar Singh. Sir, I have just one doubt, one question.
Yes.
What will be the effect of increasing contact pressure on performance of fuel cell? If we increasing contact pressure, then what its fuel performance increases or decreases?
Okay, so I'll definitely answer that question. It's really a good question. Let me just go back here. I think this slide will be appropriate. Can you see the slide number 41? Okay, so let me answer your question. You are talking about the contact pressure and its increment in its contact pressure, and what will be its effect on the cell performance. So first of all, if you see, if there is increase in the contact pressure, like I've already said, if there is an increase in the contact pressure, if you just take out these first three figures with clamping torque 3 Newton, 4 Newton meters. Now, using some appropriate clamping mechanism, you are increasing the contact pressure at the interface. Now, when you are increasing the contact pressure, you are generating more pathways for electrons to cross that interface, to cross that boundary, or to jump from the gas diffusion layer to the bipolar plate. So it is actually good for the cell. We always intend to increase the contact pressure at the interface, but now that has also got some, the uppercut. You just cannot increase it linearly or just like that. If you increase more than 1 megapascal of this contact pressure at the interface, in order to do that, you also have to clamp your cell much higher with much higher values. So, for example, let me just talk about this type of cell, or with cell with this area. I think this is like 100 centimeter square cell. So, or sorry, this is I think 50 centimeter square cell. So if you can see, I have to put 5 Newton meters of torque at each bolt to reach the contact pressure of, let's say, 0.6 megapascal. If you just compare with this colors, and if you matched in colors here, it is reaching close to 0.6 megapascal. Now, in order to increase the contact pressure further, you also have to increase the clamping torque, or that is the clamping force. So if you are doing that, there is very high chance that you are actually putting your cell components in. Why do I say that? Because if you are increasing this clamping force on your cell, you are actually compressing every component. Let me just go back here. You see, once this cell is clamped, you have all these components being compressed with the same force. So the gasket, which is the which has got the the lowermost Young's modulus compared to the other components, even the membrane also is not that stiff. So you have very high chances that this membrane or the gasket can get punctured. It can get squeezed, and once it gets squeezed or punctured, there is nothing you can do about it. You have to replace your membrane as well as gasket, or even your gas diffusion layer as well. So the answer to your question is yes, we have to increase the contact pressure, but we also have to limit. You have to put, or you have to maintain some limit in increasing the contact pressure so that the cell components are not damaged when we actually clamp the cell. I hope I have answered your question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
I'm Twinkle from College of Engineering, Pune.
Yes.
I wanted to ask, where is the water outlet for the central BPP when the cells are stacked?
Okay, so let me go back here in the schematic working. I think here. So the water will come out. If you can see this slide number 32, the water will come out with the along with the oxygen that has got separate exit here.
Okay.
Yeah. So those arrangements we have to take care for the central bipolar plates, which again deal with distribution of gases on the both sides.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Yes. Any more questions? Sudha madam, Sudha, Dr. Sudha. Participants are requested to mute themselves if they don't want to ask anything questions. So if there are any questions, if there are no questions, I think we'll just wind it up. We'll have a quick break. Okay, so thank you everyone. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Let's have a break for 20 minutes. Let's break for tea, and then we'll come back at sharp at 11:30 hours with the next session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.